Get out of my house! I roared, my voice filled with rage. The entire room fell silent. My relatives around me turned, startled, to look at me. But I didn't care. I only stared at Miles, my son. He stood there saying nothing. No resistance, no pleading. Just his eyes that, even now, I still can't forget. Not anger, not fear, but a heartbreaking helplessness. And then he turned away, never looking back. Months have passed, and I've realized I was wrong. But is it too late to make things right? Follow my story and give me your advice on how to save my family. Hello, I'm Hank Sullivan, 62 years old. I used to be the most powerful man in my world. At least, that's how I saw it. I wasn't some desk jockey. I wasn't the kind to bow to anyone. I was the best damn mechanic Redmond, Oregon had ever seen. I could tell what was wrong with an engine just by its sound. One glance at a car, and I'd know precisely what dumb mistake its owner had made. This town knew my worth. I worked from dawn till dusk, my hands always covered in grease, my muscles built from lifting engines and tightening bolts. I didn't need anyone's pity. I built this house with my sweat and blood. I provided for my family. I made the rules and everyone followed them. But then the world changed. Cars weren't just machines anymore. They were stuffed with chips and software, useless junk I couldn't care less about. But my customers did. They started taking their cars to modern shops instead. People like me became relics of the past. And just like that, I was officially out of a job 5 years ago. Now I sit at home, living off my son's money, my son, who does nothing but stare at a computer screen all day. Miles, my son, is 30 years old and a software engineer. To most people, that might sound like an exciting career, a good job. But to me, it was different. I never respected his work. A man should know how to labor and use his hands to earn a living. He should know how to fix cars, understand mechanics, and sweat for his paycheck. Not sit in front of a computer screen, tapping away at a keyboard, thinking he's doing something important. I remember when Miles was 10, he would always stay close whenever I worked in the garage. He wasn't a wild kid, never running around or getting in my way. He'd stand quietly in a corner, watching, his eyes shining like he was trying to memorize every move I made. I remember he handed me a wrench while I was working on a car, his face beaming with pride, like he had just done something tremendous. I chuckled and ruffled his hair. "Good job, kid." He grinned ear to ear. I could see the joy in his eyes. And back then, I thought, he would follow in my footsteps and become a real man. I had high hopes for him. I thought he'd take over my garage one day and become a great mechanic, maybe even better than me. So when he started getting into computers, technology, and software, I dismissed it as just a childish phase. Unlike me, my wife, Ellen, always supported Miles. She praised, defended, and encouraged him when he became interested in computers. And to me, that was an insult. I couldn't let her and him do whatever they wanted in my house. In my house, everything had to go my way. At first, Ellen and Miles seemed afraid, but then something happened when he was 16 that completely changed how he looked at me. That day, he came home from school still in his uniform, his face fawning like he had something incredible to share. He sat down at the dinner table, barely waiting for anyone to ask, before blurting out excitedly, "Mom, Dad, today I learned how to code. It's amazing, just a few lines, and I can create an entire program." He kept talking, eyes shining with excitement. Then he turned to me, his voice full of hope. "Dad, I want to be a software engineer. That's my dream." I slammed my spoon down on the table, my eyes cold as I stared at him. "Dream? You want to sit in front of a computer all day, typing nonsense, and call that a job?" His lips pressed together, but he still tried to explain. "Dad, it's not meaningless. Technology is changing the world. I cut him off immediately. Never mention computers or technology in front of me again. Silence. Absolute silence at the dinner table. Miles lowered his head. Ellen, on the other hand, had had enough. She set her chopsticks down and met my gaze, and her voice was sharper than ever. "Hank, you can't force him to follow your path. He has the right to pursue what he loves." I lifted my head and narrowed my eyes. "Right? In this house, I make the decisions." But she didn't back down. "Miles has talent. Can't you see that? He's smart, driven, and has a chance to go farther than anyone in this family ever has. That set me off. I slammed my fist on the table. The dishes rattled. A plate slid off the edge and shattered on the floor. In this house, my word is law. But Ellen stood her ground. She shot up from her seat, stepping between me and Miles, her voice firmer than I had ever heard. "Hank, don't ruin his future just because of your pride," I roared. "He doesn't get a choice. He must learn to fix cars and sweat for his money, just like I did." Miles stood frozen. His eyes were red, but he didn't cry. He just looked at me. And in that moment, I saw something in his eyes change. It was no more extended admiration. No longer the look of a boy wanting to make his father proud. It was a pure, crushing disappointment. But that wasn't the first time I crushed his dreams. Miles had learned a much harsher lesson before. I remember when he was 13. He had spent months saving his lunch money to buy a cheap toy computer. That day, he ran home, eyes shining, and held up the box for me to see. "Dad, I can program games on this." I picked it up, glanced at it, then burst out laughing. "This? You call this a computer?" He blinked, confused. I grabbed it and threw it straight to the floor. The plastic shell cracked in half. Miles gasped and dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he picked up the broken pieces. Ellen rushed over, wrapping her arms around him, whispering words of comfort. I just stood there, cold and unmoved. "You're crying? A man crying over a piece of junk like this? What's he ever going to accomplish?" He didn't say a word. He kept his head down, gripping those shattered fragments like they were the most essential thing in the world. I thought he'd learn from that moment. I thought he'd toughen up. But I was wrong. Instead of giving up, he kept chasing that worthless dream. And now he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and sends money back to me as if I were some pitiful old man in need of charity. I take his money, but I have never felt grateful. Because in my mind, I'm still his father. I make the decisions. Even if I live off his money, he should still fear me. Miles had started sending me money about 5 years ago when he found out I had sold the garage and was out of work. $5,000 a month. All from that keyboard tapping job I once looked down on. On the first of every month, like clockwork, my bank account is updated. I didn't have to lift a finger. All I had to do was spend his money. An 85-inch TV? Bought. A genuine leather recliner? Got it. New kitchen floors? Installed immediately. I never had to pinch pennies or think twice before buying something. I lived like a king in the house I had built with my sweat, off the money Miles sent me every month. To me, it was only natural. A father raises his son, and the son must repay him. I didn't know him a damn thing. But Ellen didn't see it that way. She saw me spending and using Miles' money, but rarely said anything. Except once. That night, I was lounging in my recliner, drinking in hand, eyes fixed on the new TV. Ellen quietly sat down beside me. Her eyes glistened like she had been holding something in for a long time. "Miles loves you," she said softly. But something firm was in her choice. "He takes care of this family." My smile disappeared. I reached for the remote and turned off the TV. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. I turned to Ellen, my gaze sharp, my voice cold and firm. "Just because he throws me a few bucks doesn't mean I have to bow down to him." Ellen pressed her lips together, her fingers tightening around the hem of her shirt. But she said nothing. I stared at her, waiting for a reaction, a challenge, a bit of resistance, but she only lowered her head, just like she always did. And so I kept living off my son's money, the money I once despised. Until Thanksgiving a few months ago, the night that severed the last thread between me and Miles. Thanksgiving the few months ago started like any other year. Family gathered around the table, plates piled high, glasses filled with fine wine. But there was one difference. Everything on that table had been paid for with Miles's money. I set a massive turkey in the center, surrounded by expensive wine, cranberry sauce, and mashed potatoes. All the things Ellen always said were excessive. But I didn't care. This was my house, my dinner, and I wanted everyone to remember who was in charge of this family. Relatives filled the room, laughter rang out, glasses clinked together in the joyful chaos of reunion. I sat at the head of the table, legs propped up on the chair beside me. a glass of wine in hand, feeling like a king at his grand feast. Then after a few drinks, I stood up, raised my glass, and sneered. Can you believe it? My son makes a living by playing games and typing on a keyboard. A few people chuckled. I smirked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He sits in front of a screen all day, taps out a few meaningless lines of code, and somehow makes a fortune. It's ridiculous. The laughter at the table grew louder. Some nodded along, others clapped me on the back as if to agree. But Miles didn't laugh. He sat there, gripping his wine glass, eyes cast downward. Ellen placed a hand on his shoulder as if trying to comfort him, but this time he didn't back down. Miles suddenly stood up. His voice was steady, cold. If my job is so worthless, you don't need my money anymore. The room fell silent. He took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eye. Do you even know where the $5,000 you spend every month comes from? From the very meaningless work you just mocked. I felt the anger burn in my chest, but I kept my face calm with so many eyes on me. I set my glass down, my voice low and threatening. What did you just say? I locked eyes with him, my tone firm and commanding. You should remember, in my house, you fear me. No matter what I say, you don't talk back. Don't think sending me a few bucks gives you the right to act superior. Miles didn't even blink. His voice didn't waver. Then starting next month, I'll stop sending money. Do whatever you want. Rage exploded inside me. I slammed my fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. Get out of my house, Ellen gasped. The relatives sat in stunned silence. But Miles didn't say another word. He just looked at me one last time. Not with anger, not with pain, but with relief. Then he turned and walked straight to the door. He never looked back. No matter how much the family tried to stop him, or how desperately Ellen called his name, he didn't hesitate. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the bond between father and son was severed forever. A month had passed since Thanksgiving. I was still sitting in my leather recliner, watching my 85-inch TV and drinking beer in the house I had built. But one thing had changed, the bills. They came piling in, electricity, water, property taxes, stacked high on the kitchen counter, a constant reminder that the money had stopped flowing. Before, I never paid attention to any of this. I just lived, spent Miles's money, and everything was handled. Not anymore. I gripped a bill in my hand, frustration rising in my chest. As I stared at the pile of bills, trying to figure out what to do, Ellen sat with her phone in hand, sighing now and then. She didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what was on her mind. And just as I expected, she finally spoke when night fell, and I was lounging in my chair, beer in hand. Hank, Miles loves you. I glanced over and saw her eyes glistening as if she were carefully choosing her words. He's just angry right now. I set my beer down on the table and raised an eyebrow. You're taking his side? Ellen slowly shook her head. I'm not taking sides, but think about it. Miles never did anything wrong. He just wanted his father's respect. I let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Respect? A guy who sits around tapping on a keyboard all day wants my respect? What, am I supposed to thank him for throwing me a few bucks? Ellen took a deep breath, and for the first time, she didn't lower her head like usual. He worked hard for that money. He didn't owe you anything. My teeth clenched, and my breathing grew heavier. What about me? I raised him, fed him, gave him everything, and now he turns his back on me? Ellen held my gaze, her voice steady and firm. He didn't turn his back on you, Hank. You pushed him away. I shot up from my chair, scattering the bills onto the floor. He's nothing without me. Do you hear me? Ellen didn't step back. She just pressed her lips together, but I saw her shoulders tremble. I hated that look. I hated how she stared at me, like I was a failure. And then her voice came, slow and deliberate. Miles just wanted his father to love him. My fist clenched tight, a pressure building in my chest like a vice. But instead of accepting it, I exploded. Don't bring him up again. Ellen flinched, but she didn't turn away. She stood there, silent tears rolling down her cheeks, not out of fear, but disappointment. I stared at her for a long moment before taking a deep breath, my voice cold as ice. If you mention him in this house again, pack your bags and leave. Ellen's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. But I didn't take it back, because in my house, no one went against me. When those words left my mouth, my wife stood up to me for the first time. She didn't step back. She didn't lower her head like she always did. Her eyes were red, but there was a terrifying determination in them. Fine, I'll leave. I'll go live with Miles. The second she said it, I snapped. Then get out! Go live with your precious son! I roared, my voice echoing through the living room. But Ellen didn't argue. She turned away and walked toward our bedroom without another word. I sank back into my chair, glaring at her retreating figure, convinced she wouldn't leave. Ellen had always been this way. She could disagree and get angry, but she had never truly defied me. The following day, I woke up later than usual. The house was eerily quiet, no sound of Ellen's footsteps. There was no scent of freshly brewed coffee like every other morning. I walked into the kitchen. She wasn't there. I stayed calm. Maybe she had gone out to the market for a walk, something. But as the day stretched and the sun began to set, she still hadn't returned. That's when I started to feel uneasy. By the time the street lights flickered on outside, the house was still empty, and the silence had become unbearable. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called her. The line rang. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I kept calling. 5 times, 10 times, 20. There was endless ringing every time. No voice, no response. My jaw clenched as I threw the phone onto the table. Then I decided I wasn't going to call anymore. Instead, I stood up, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a few beers. I cracked one open, tilted my head back, and took a long drink, trying to drown out the growing discomfort gnawing at my chest. The following day, I got news about Ellen. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. Karen, my nosy sister-in-law. I took a sip of beer, eyes still glued to the TV, not planning to pick up, but the damn thing kept ringing. Finally irritated, I answered, my voice cold. What? Karen let out a sharp breath before speaking. Hank, you've destroyed your family. Ellen's been crying nonstop at Miles' place. I smirked, shaking my head. Here we go again. Another person thought they could lecture me. I put her on speaker and replied casually. I'm his father. What the hell do you people know? Karen didn't back down. Her voice dropped as if she was forcing herself to stay calm. Hank, have you ever considered that maybe you went too far? I let out a bitter laugh. Too far? She left on her own. I didn't kick anyone out. Karen scoffed on the other end. Oh? Did you forget what you said? Get out, go live with your precious son. My grip on the phone tightened, my lips pressing into a thin line. Karen's voice turned sharp. You think Ellen isn't hurting? I frowned, irritation creeping into my tone. She's just too soft. Karen sighed, but it wasn't pleading this time. It was final. Hank, stop being so damn stubborn. My jaw clenched. So what? She'll come back. She always does. Silence. Then Karen spoke again, this time firm and unwavering. No, Hank, not this time. I froze. Ellen had always come back, but Karen kept going, her voice steady. And Miles isn't the same kid anymore either. He's not that boy who used to tremble when you yelled at Ellen. He's done, I snapped. I raised him. Without me, he'd be nothing. Karen went quiet momentarily before speaking, her words cutting like a blade. You'll never understand, Hank, because you've never cared about anyone but yourself. I clenched the phone, then yanked it away from my ear, ending the call with a sharp thumb press. I tossed the phone aside and leaned back in my chair, forcing myself to breathe evenly. But in this empty house, the silence was heavier than ever. 2 days later, I woke up with a sharp pain in my chest, a heavy pressure, like someone had placed a brick on me all night. I sat up, coughing, a dry, burning scratch in my throat. Another cough followed, deeper, harsher, forcing me to double over in pain. I shook my head, trying to push away the exhaustion. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. Empty. Nothing but a cheap can of beer and a stale piece of bread. Ellen wasn't here to do the shopping. Miles wasn't sending money to keep it stocked anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Doesn't matter. I'd lived through hard times before. I'd get through this again. But then my eyes landed on the pile of bills. Rent, electricity, water. They all stacked up, all coming at me at once. And without Miles' $5,000, they suddenly felt impossible. And that's when I knew I needed a job. I slipped on my worn-out boots, grabbed my jacket, and walked into town. There was only one place where I knew I still had value: the old repair shop I used to own. The bell above the door chimed as I pushed it open. Behind the counter stood Jim, the kid who once worked under me. Now he ran the place. He looked up, surprised. "Hank?" He blinked. "Haven't seen you in a long time." I nodded, resting my hands on the counter. "I need work." Jim hesitated. "Doing what?" I folded my arms. "I was the best damn mechanic here. You know that." Jim nodded, but his eyes weren't like before. No admiration, just hesitation. "Hank, you're not the same anymore." I frowned. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Jim sighed, flipping through the ledger before him like he was trying to avoid my gaze. "The industry's changed. Cars aren't just machines anymore. They're computers. You need certifications to fix the electronic systems. It's not just muscle." My fists clenched. "You calling me useless?" I growled. Jim shook his head. "No one said that, Hank. But you're old." A sharp, twisting ache hit my chest. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Jim finally looked up. The hesitation in his eyes was gone, replaced by pity. "I'm sorry, Hank. I can't hire you." My teeth clenched. I turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind me, my hands shaking with rage. A week later, I started selling things as the bills kept piling up. The big screen TV, gone. The high-end speaker system, gone. The wine collection I once bragged about to my relatives, sold every last bottle. The house grew emptier, and I grew weaker. Every step felt slower. Every breath felt heavier. I looked at myself in the mirror. A gaunt man stared back. Sunken eyes, skin dull and gray from cheap beer and cigarettes. After selling off more belongings that night, I entered the bedroom and looked around. The bed was still there, but without Ellen's warmth. The closet door was slightly open, one side empty. Ellen used to stand there every morning, wrapped in her old cotton robe, reminding me to eat breakfast. Now there was no one. I sat down on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on my knees, running my rough hands over my face. I had always believed that no one dared defy me in this house. But then why, this time, did it feel like I was the one who had lost? I tore through the drawers the following day, searching for the house deed. I needed to mortgage this place, at least to buy some time. I yanked open every cabinet and drawer, pulling out stacks of paperwork, my eyes scanning each page. Then my fingers brushed against something old and crumpled. I froze. A yellowed piece of paper. Frowning, I pulled it from the mess and glanced over the fine print. Retirement insurance policy. My brows knitted together. Something felt off. I read closer. Policyholder, Miles Sullivan. Beneficiary, Hank Sullivan. I reread it, and again, but it didn't change. Miles had taken out a retirement policy for me 5 years ago, without saying a word, without bragging, without asking for thanks. I gripped the paper tighter, my breath growing uneven. Why? Why would he do this? I snatched my phone and dialed Ellen's number, my fingers squeezing the device so hard my knuckles turned white. The phone rang. No answer. I couldn't hold back. I left a voicemail, short, cold, and filled with anger. "Call me back, now, or I swear I'll burn this house to the ground." The phone rang almost immediately. I answered without hesitation, not giving her a chance to speak before I barked, "What the hell is this insurance? Miles taking care of me?" Silence. Then a faint sound. Maybe Ellen moving through the kitchen, settling onto a couch at Miles' place. Finally, her voice came through, so soft I almost missed it. "He did it because he loves you." I shot up from my seat, nearly crushing the paper in my fist. "I don't need his pity," Ellen sighed, but this time her voice didn't waver. There was something steadier now, firmer. "He's your son, Hank." My teeth clenched, my fists tightening. "I don't need anyone to take care of me." Ellen didn't respond right away. A heavy silence stretched between us. Then she spoke the words that froze me in place. Hank, have you ever asked yourself why, no matter how you treated him, Miles still tried to help you? I gripped the phone tighter but said nothing. Ellen continued, her voice even and measured, but each word cut deep. He sent you money every month, took care of you, even when you never appreciated him. He bought this insurance policy, knowing you might never say thank you. Heat surged through me, my pulse pounding in my ears. I never asked him to do that. I snapped. No, but he did it anyway. I went completely still. A sharp pain stabbed through my chest. I coughed, deep, complex, relentless. It wouldn't stop. I had to brace myself against the wall to stay upright, dizzy. The whole room spun, but I didn't say a word about it. Instead, I stared down at the insurance policy in my shaking hands, like it was some foreign thing I couldn't recognize. Then I threw it to the floor, like rejecting it would make it disappear. But the emptiness inside me, why did it keep growing? That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new message. I didn't bother checking, probably another useless ad or notification. But a few seconds later, it buzzed again. This time, I glanced at the screen. First message, $2,000 deposited into your account. I frowned, staring at the numbers, not believing my eyes. Then another message came through, this time from Ellen. Miles knows you went to gym looking for work. He paid your bills. From now on, he'll send you $2,000 a month. Think about it, Hank. Stop being so stubborn. My jaw tightened, fingers gripping the phone, so challenging my knuckles turned white. I didn't need his pity. Without hesitation, I typed a reply. Tell him I don't need it. A few seconds later, Ellen's response appeared. Up to you. Short, no argument, no pleading. I sat there staring at the screen, anger rising in my chest, but I didn't do anything. And just like that, another 2 months passed, and I kept living off my son's money. I still believed I was right. I still believed I didn't need anyone, until a week ago, when I broke my leg. That day, the sky was dull and gray, the wind howling through the window cracks, warning of an approaching storm. I was heading down the stairs, a beer can in hand, my head dizzy from the alcohol. My foot slipped. I had nothing to grab onto before my body tumbled forward, crashing down the steps. My head slammed against the stair railing. A sharp, searing pain tore through my right leg like a knife slicing into bone. I roared in agony, but the house was silent. No Ellen, no Miles, no one to run over and help me up. I lay there gasping for breath, my shaking fingers fumbling into my pocket until they found my phone. I pressed 911, my voice hoarse when the dispatcher answered. I need an ambulance. I barely managed to give them my address before everything went black. The following day, I woke up in a hospital room. Bright white lights streamed through the window, the sharp scent of disinfectant filling my nose. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I frowned, pain radiating from my leg up to my back. Then the door creaked open. I turned my head, my eyes widening. Ellen, Miles. Both of them stood there looking at me. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to say. Ellen and Miles stood there, their eyes filled with worry. Miles stepped closer to the hospital bed, his voice low but gentle. How are you feeling, Dad? I gripped the blanket slightly, an uneasy feeling rising in my chest. This kind of concern, that soft, patient tone, the kind I had always hated. But this time, I didn't lash out at him. I stayed silent, turning my face toward the wall, refusing to look at him. Miles didn't push. Ellen sighed. No one forced me to answer. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Ellen stayed to take care of me. No complaints, no blame, even though I never thanked her. Miles went back to work, but he didn't disappear completely. Ellen's phone would ring every day, and I knew exactly who was on the other end. Miles, he never called me. He called Ellen to check on me and ask if I was eating correctly, resting enough, and doing okay. I sat in my chair, pretending not to care, but I heard every word, and I hated it. I hated feeling cared for, but not knowing how to respond. These past few days, I've had much time to think, and I've realized I was wrong. Not just once, I've been wrong for years. I pushed my wife away. I made my son turn his back on me. I want to make things right with Miles. I want to tell him that I was wrong, that I was too stubborn, too proud, but I don't know where to start or how to say it. And more than anything, I'm afraid. Afraid that if I admit it, I'll lose the last shred of dignity I have left. Afraid that once I apologize, I won't be Hank Sullivan anymore. I'm sharing this story not to make excuses, but not to seek sympathy. But I want to ask you, the ones who are listening, what should I do? Can you give me advice? Should I let go of my pride to save my family? Or should I continue living in the shadow of the man I once thought was invincible, only to die alone? And to the fathers, to the husbands out there, if any of you are like me, change while you still can. Don't wait until your wife walks away. Don't wait until you're sitting alone in an empty house. Don't wait until you want to say sorry but have no idea where to begin. By then, it might be too late. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story. See you in the next one with more interesting stories. Goodbye for now.